Right. So we're going deep today, like really deep, talking mountains.
Mountains.
Mountains. But not just like, oh, look, a big rock. More like, what's in a name? Why'd they get called what they're called? And also, how high GH are these things, really?
Yeah, the naming thing, ice and interesting, says a lot about the folks who live around them. History,
Yeah.
beliefs.
Right. So, gotta start with the famous one, Everest. I mean, 8,848.86 meters. That's almost 9 kilometers straight up.
Mhm.
But it's not just the height. It's got these different names depending on where you are.
Oh, absolutely. So in Nepali, it's Sagarmatha. That translates to forehead of the sky, which, I mean, look at the thing, right? Makes sense.
Poetic, kind of.
Yeah.
But then you've got Shamalunga, the Tibetan name.
Yeah.
Goddess, mother of the world. That's a whole other vibe.
Totally. It's not just geography to them. It's
Yeah.
like deeply spiritual. Shows you how different cultures experience the same mountain, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so Everest is out there on its own, but what about Kanchenjunga? Third highest, over 8,500 meters too. But the name,
5 treasures of snow. And it's not just a fancy name. It actually has 5 peaks, and each one is considered sacred by the locals. On the border of Nepal and India. Pretty amazing sight.
5 peaks. It's like a mountain range all by itself.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of amazing, gotta mention Lhotse, fourth highest, and sharing a climbing route with Everest, no less.
Self peak. That's what Lhotse means in Tibetan. Simple, right? But it kind of foreshadows how tough it is to climb, especially compared to some others.
So even the simple names tell a story. Okay, what about Makalu? That one's next on the list, yeah.
Makalu comes in at 8,485 meters. Big one. Name might come from Mahakala, which is like a god name, Shiva, in Hinduism. And the mountain itself is this huge E-pyramid, super isolated, known for being tough to climb.
So you got the top 5, all crazy tall, and then what?
Cho-Oyu is up next. 6th highest, but it's considered one of the easier climbs, relatively speaking, of course. Still over 8,000 meters, but doable if you're, into that sort of thing.
Turquoise goddess, that's what Choyu means, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And it's popular not just for hardcore climbers, but trekkers too. Amazing views, apparently.
Makes sense. Got to have some beauty to balance out the danger, right? So what's next on the list?
Dhaulagiri, 7th highest, and the name is, well, pretty literal. White Mountain. Makes sense when you see it, all covered in snow and ice. Very striking.
Straightforward, but effective. You can picture it instantly, can't you? What about Manaslu, number 8?
Manaslu is a little bit shorter, 8,163 meters. It's called the Mountain of the Spirit, and that comes from Manasa, which is like intellect or soul in Sanskrit. This one's revered not just for being tall, but for its beauty, the whole area. There's a famous trek, the Manaslu circuit, that goes around it. It's supposedly one of the best in the Himalayas.
Okay, so we've got all these evocative names tied to spirituality, gods, and then there's Annapurna Mahat.
Annapurnavite is the 10th highest, just over 8,000 meters, but the name, it's a goddess, Hindu goddess of harvest, nourishment. Kind of fitting, considering it's part of this whole mountain range, the Annapurna Massif, that's huge GE.
Right, and that whole massif is a big deal for the folks living around there, right? Not just for climbing, but, well, like the name suggests, it supports them.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because the Annapurna circuit, which is a popular trek, it's beautiful, no doubt, but it's known for being kind of dangerous too.
So it's not all about spirituality and pretty names. There's some real power behind these mountains.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's the takeaway here. We can get caught up in the numbers, the heights, but these names remind us. They're not just rocks, they're symbols, sources of inspiration, but also, they've shaped history and beliefs for centuries. Makes you wonder what other stories are out there, right? On mountains we haven't even talked about.
Yeah, no kidding. There's a whole world out there, and we just scratched the surface. But hey, that's the fun of a deep dive, isn't it?
Absolutely.
All right, that's it for today. Until next time, keep looking up, folks. You never know what stories you might find.
See you next time.